This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. Be inspired by the voices of visionaries, changemakers, and ordinary, extraordinary people who do what they do all for the love of learning.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. I'm Lainey Liberty, and this is episode number 122. This evening, we're going to have a conversation with parents who have made some hard decisions in support of their children's education. In the case of some of our panelists, some have either moved, given up careers, or changed their life focus either personally or professionally. However, none of our panelists feel as if they've sacrificed anything. I'm excited to be among these strong, dedicated parents, as I too fit into this category. When I put out a call for this topic through social media, I received an overwhelming response. So many parents were we're excited to be a part of the panels, and we're breaking this show into two parts. So this is part one, and part two will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'm moved beyond the dedication of this community who will do what they need to do to support their children's education. I'm so moved and so touched. So I'm anxious to get this conversation started and to hear everybody's stories. I'm going to first read each of our panelists' bios, but I want to remind our audience that you can find out more about each of our panelists on the show notes page located at fortheloveoflearningshow.com, and look for the show notes page for episode number 122. There you will find more information about each of our panelists and links to their projects and websites. So our first guests tonight are Kelly and Hani. Kelly and Hani are co-founders and facilitators of Zigzag ALC, a school for self-directed education in Asheville, North Carolina. Previously, Kelly taught in a public high school and worked as a consultant for school districts to develop, implement, and evaluate service learning and social emotional learning programs. Kelly has a passion for children and their right to play, and has helped co-found Asheville Adventure Play, a group dedicated to creating spaces for kid-structured play. Kelly is trained as an agile learning facilitator and has a master's in education and a master's in clinical psychology. And I'd like to introduce her partner, Hani. Hani had a long-time career in the tech industry where he honed his analytical and executive management skills. He has since grown into a facilitator of all things that help people connect more deeply to each other, from intergenerational improv to relationship coaching to community mediation. Hani is a children's rights advocate and has taught kids and adults in many settings over the years. He loves to interact with kids of all ages through play, service, learning, and engaging their curiosity. He is also trained as an agile learning facilitator and has a master's in computer science. My son Miro and I had the pleasure of meeting this couple in person a couple of weeks ago on our visit to Asheville, North Carolina. And as you'll see during the break interview, my son had the honor of interviewing both of them. Also, they were the inspiration for tonight's show and the upcoming part two as well. So I'm happy to welcome you both to the show. Welcome, Hani and Kelly.
Thank you so much. We're so glad to be here.
Yes, I'm excited
to be talking to you.
Hi.
We're really excited to have you. Next, I'd like to introduce Lisa. Lisa is an intuitive guide and mentor to spiritual entrepreneurs and seekers. Her mission is to connect clients with their deepest soul purpose to express their highest creativity and fulfillment. She combines modern shamanic practices and energy work with pragmatic methodologies and gleaned from 20 years as an entrepreneur. She specializes in removing energies that interfere with their clients' soul guidance. Her background allows her to assist them in aligning their lives with their own soul purpose and personal sacred mission. Lisa's first entrepreneurial venture was a Montessori school for her 3 children. She has homeschooled and unschooled all 3 and appeared on her first panel on education at age 12 when she represented Montessori children on a radio show. So welcome to tonight's panel, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me here, Lainey. I'm excited.
You're very, very welcome, and we're excited to have you as well. Next, I'd like to introduce Anne. Anne has worked with children and families for over 27 years. She has a master's degree in education and completed a 2-year certification program studying the effects of stress and trauma on early brain development. Anne's interest on how humans learn and grow has led to continued study of family relationships and adult development. She has worked in a variety of settings as a teacher, consultant, child development specialist, group facilitator, and administrator, and is also a certified yoga instructor and continues to study mind-body integration and its relationship to communication and meaningful learning, and co-founded and currently consults with homeschooling families through Origins Homeschool Consulting. She also works privately with families who are seeking a deeper understanding of their children and curious about more conscious parenting. In addition to consulting, Anne conducts workshops teaching mindfulness studies to teens and adult workshops incorporating yoga-inspired mind-body movement to support self-awareness, communication, and personal growth. She's also involved with Global Village Schools, supporting families on their homeschooling journey. Anne's passion for natural learning has shifted her life in many ways and led her to homeschool her 2 boys, who are now teenagers. Welcome to tonight's panel, Anne.
Hi, Lainey. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you. Next, I'd like to introduce Sweta. Sweta is the author of the book, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Now What? Her 17-year profession of pharmacy after she left her 17-year profession of pharmacy after the premature birth of her son, leaving a decade-long career as a professor. She then took a deep dive into her soul. To her surprise, Sweta came out a writer, practical mystic, and compulsive storyteller. Her mission to support martyrs to get a life in the most compassionate way possible. Sweta's passionate about supporting women to experience balance, belonging, and beauty from the inside out. She's determined to get moms to honor their intuition and lead their family through her customized unique harmony lifestyle process. Her approach is about giving permission to all who want it in your terms without having to do it alone. Welcome to tonight's panel, Sweta.
Hi, Lainey. Thank you so much for having me here. I saw the response, so I feel very honored.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I was so inspired by your story, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into everybody's stories. But first, I'd like to introduce our last panelists, a couple, Christopher and Beth. At the dawn of a new century, Christopher and Beth were new parents. As they began to consider their new daughter's future, they both agreed that traditional education or family life as it had evolved was not conducive to the lifestyle they envisioned. They set out collecting and reading a variety of parenting, educational, and homeschool books, among many topics related to family life. Christopher was influenced by Howard Gardner's book, The Unschooled Mind, and both he and Beth were inspired by Alfie Kohn's Unconditional Parenting. Despite these influences and many others, the new and different way of life they envisioned collided with the conflict between raising a family and making ends meet, personal struggles, marital discord, and a general lack of support for non-traditional ways of raising children. They were not how they wanted or how they felt was best. In late 2011, they began a series of lifestyle changes, beginning with Christopher's physical health, which was the catalyst to redesigning their business, their home organization, their family rituals and tradition, and their nutritional and economical health. To be successful, it all had to work seamlessly to support their number one most important purpose, their children. To achieve a complete transformation of their lifestyle, Christopher developed a yoga trio of systematic approaches: the old school approach for the body, the role model approach for the mind, and the natural approach for the spirit. These three systems coordinate all major aspects into a holistic narrative, whole, of course, in quotations, holistic narrative where no domain has to be ignored and gives more attention to others. Their family's daily life guided by following and continuing to improve upon the systems for their ultimate goal of sharing these approaches to living harmonious, fulfilling, and a balanced life with all other seekers of the seemingly elusive goal, and to build a community for families and mentors that all work together to provide the best possible life for all. We're so excited to welcome all of tonight's panelists and to welcome Beth and Christopher to the panel. I don't see Christopher available yet, so we're not yet. Well, let me just welcome you, Beth, and we're going to come back with your introduction when Christopher's here. We had a mix-up with the time zones. So welcome to tonight's panel, and we're going to jump back to your story in just a little bit. But first, we're going to jump over to Kelly and Hattie, since you two were the inspiration for this show, and everybody's stories are extremely inspirational, but I'd like for you guys to share a little bit about what brought you to this point. Everybody else, I'm going to ask, why did you respond to my call out? But you didn't have a choice. You inspired it, and we built the show around what I thought was a very inspirational story. I'd like for you to share a little bit about why you started a school, and why, maybe Hani, why you left the tech world, and why you and Kelly decided to form the school. We've also had you on the program before talking specifically about ALC schools, and we'll talk a little bit about everybody's projects in the second hour. But I'm more interested at this point in your personal stories and what keeps you motivated to do the work that you do.
I guess we can take turns, but the thing that happened for me was we had kids a little bit later in our lives, so than a lot of parents do, and we really committed to having our focus being this project of having kids. That became our primary kind of responsibility, and we kind of investigated lots of different ways of doing it, and kind of followed this peaceful parenting path. For a lot of the time, for the first few years, we're very focused in our family and how to really experiment with this honoring kids and prioritizing kids and all that. And when it came time to school and we looked around, we wanted just to extend that. So we kind of have picked up on the unschooling idea a lot, earlier during that journey. But we very quickly realized that we can't really do unschooling just in our family once our kids hit 3, 4, 5 years old. We wanted a bigger community, and we looked around at different schools, and there was really nothing that did for schooling what we have been doing for parenting. So we basically that's kind of like short version of how we decided to do this is like, well, we've got to create this for ourselves, basically, because it doesn't exist. And we were really tied to Asheville, so we didn't want to go anywhere else. And we met Thomas and Nancy in Charlotte, which is a couple of hours away. And when we met them, we were really blown away of how similar this is to our style, this agile learning kind of way of doing it. And we just went for it, and that was only last year, so it's not a very long time yet, but that was kind of our transition to it as an extension of how we did it.
Yeah, maybe one other aspect to it is just, you know, I kind of realized early on, like I wanted to be a part of the learning. Like it was all very exciting to me, being with my kids, growing, and yeah. So this was also like the starting the school. Like felt like we really loved all being together, and like another way for us to like continue that journey. You know, include more people in that.
Kelly, were you intending to be a stay-at-home mom in the, you know, from the beginning?
No, I wasn't. I, in fact, went back to work. I was teaching high school when I had my first kid, and I went back to work about 4 months old. And I was lucky enough that I could actually come back home. I was breastfeeding during that time, and I would come back. I lived close to the school, and I would, in my breaks, go back and nurse and go back to school. And we were also living in Louisiana at the time, and just all of it, like the culture where I was, wasn't very supportive of how I wanted to really live my life or have a life for my kids. And the work schedule being gone so much didn't quite feel right. So I knew I wanted to do something else, but I wasn't sure what it would be, and I hadn't really planned on just staying home.
And Hanny, why don't you talk a little bit about moving from technology into working with children?
So it was just, it came at the right time. I was really like, I did the technology thing for a while, and I was really getting a little burnt out doing it. And the big challenge for me was definitely the money, like, because we had really no idea how we were going to make an income while we did this thing for our kids. And the toughest part was, and a lot of people were thinking I was crazy for leaving this like career and opportunity, and the thought in the beginning, well, I'm going to do it for a year and then just see how it goes. But once I left, it was a lot easier. It was just being so engaged with my kids and with just with this new way of living, totally made up for that loss of money thing, and we're still making it work. You know, it's just we have to be creative about it and come up with just put our heads together to make it work, and it totally is. It's totally work.
From the outside world, some would say you gave up, you know, being able to support your family with a financial security for what, right? I mean, I've had the same comments like, where's your financial security? Where,
Yeah, it's so funny. Like when we have this conversation with our kids, sometimes it's like, hey, we can have more money and more stuff if either of us goes to work a few more hours a day. Would you like that? And the answer is always no. So it's not just us. The kids have that interest too, and time is so valuable, and so this idea of just leaving and having my time completely somewhere else and having them be with someone who's not their family while I'm gone, just to make money to do what with? Like, if we don't have the time together, save it for like a 2-week vacation every year. Like, it's not nearly enough. And so it's totally, there's no, I don't have any question at this point that this is it's a lot more variable to do what I'm doing than get a little bit more money.
And I would say didn't want kids, and all he had to realize how, like, we both realized we had a shared passion and like education and how to be parents, and like we were both just devouring all the books and all the different philosophies, like just so into it. And I mean, that was something he didn't even realize he loved, before too. So I think that also did it really
there's definitely
easy.
something huge about like really putting this thing that you're so attached to on the side for a little bit, and then seeing what else comes up. And that's how it felt. That was something good.
And I find a little bit of myself in everybody's bio that I read. Like I can identify with a little bit of everybody's story. And it's interesting how we all come to the same path through our kids. It just looks different, and yes, I get it. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on so we can get to hear everybody else's story, but we're going to come back and hear more from you guys soon. Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on next to Sweta. You'll be our next person to share. First, tell me, why did you respond to, you were so excited when you responded to my social media call looking for families that were dedicated, that had changed their lives and are dedicated to their children. What made you, number one, respond and then tell us your story, but you also respond quite excitedly, and I was like, I could tell from your your messages that you really wanted to share your story.
Yeah, well, so you read in my bio that I had a pretty set life, in the sense that, if you were to look at a life resume, get married, I had an amazing career. I was making six figures by the time I was 25. I had a title of a professor. We had a house overlooking the New York skyline across the street from the university. So it was like really check, 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 everything that should make you happy. And then the last thing was like have a child. And my son was literally born, less than 3 pounds. He almost died in my womb. And the only thing that saved his life was actually a mistake. I made a mistake on my doctor's appointment. And when I arrived at the hospital, they said I had no amniotic fluid and I had to just go to the hospital, literally run to the hospital. And so as you can imagine, I think for any parent that's devastating, but in particular for me, I had such high expectations for motherhood, because to be honest with you, even though I had checked off all the things on my list, even the way I married my husband was amazing. I met him while on vacation in Peru. There was always this thing that just felt like it was missing. And I thought motherhood would be the answer to that thing. And it was far from that. I felt like I failed at motherhood before I even began. And so in some ways it was kind of like a rock bottom for me. He spent a whole month in the NICU. And I started to just say to myself, there's a reason why this happened. And I started to look within myself. I started to do some introspection. I just try to explore maybe like what's the reason for, what's the purpose for something so devastating to happen. And then on top of that, because it was still a golden handcuff job, so I had like 6 months maternity leave, I was in the education system, and I was very alternative within the education system. So this was like a doctorate program that I taught in, and it was all about making, really smart pharmacists, yet I felt very out of integrity with the way that I was supposed to teach, which was essentially give a lot of information and then data dump and take an exam. And I was always interested in creating experiential, alternative experiential experiences. So I was always about the people. I was in a community pharmacy where I created diverse programs to support patients and kind of give students the hands-on experience. And so I was able to still fulfill my passions of serving people and being creative and, serving as a healer in that way. But when I went back after maternity leave, I applied for a promotion and I didn't get it. And I thought I was a shoo-in because I'd won awards. I had gotten such positive response from everybody that like, there's no way I wouldn't have published articles. I did everything you're supposed to do. And I feel like that was the straw that really broke the camel's back. And then so I started going deeper in my own journey. And what I discovered was I actually never wanted to be a pharmacist. I was fulfilling my mother's dream. And it was so not conscious. My mom, we're from India, and you have arranged marriages in India. And so my mom always wanted to be a doctor, but at that time and age, you don't, she wasn't supported to get educated to be a doctor. She was forced to have an arranged marriage instead. And so I didn't know it, but as a young child, I think that I really felt that that longing for her of never fulfilling her dream. And so in some ways I was trying to make up for it instead of living my own life. And I made this decision of I will not do that to my son. I will not do that to my child. And that caused me to make some really interesting decisions of like taking all this risk. We quit our jobs. We made a list of, I want an environment that makes all of us happy. And so we literally made a list of what we needed. And we didn't choose where we were going to go. But we wrote community, nature, good weather, organic food, like community. It was just a list of things. And from a financial perspective, we thought we were going to move to Colombia, South America, because my husband's from Peru. I had just hosted a retreat myself there. But what ended up happening was I came to California for a workshop. And I literally saw 5 owls in like 5 minutes when I stepped out the door. And the owl to me is a sign. I don't know if you can see, but I have an owl back there. And I literally called up my husband in Peru and I said, we're moving to California. And luckily he's adventurous, so he supported me and we came out here, and it's, 3 years later, we're still here and we really built a life for ourselves. Then later on, when my son started school, because I was going through so much change myself, I didn't really have the bandwidth to look into alternative schooling. What I realized was that in some ways was the universe supporting me to bring me to the exact location I needed to be for my son to thrive, because the school system that he's in within the public existing structure has been really supportive for him, and particularly the teachers that he's had, that I don't think he definitely would have not have had that experience if we stayed in New York. So in some ways, not in some ways, I know that there's a divine orchestration, and I really believe that when we go within and we tune in and listen and pay attention to how we're being guided and ask for what we want for ourselves and our family, that it is it's a real powerful thing that you can co-create for your family.
I love how, I'm sure there's other panelists here, but I love how you mentioned how you made that list. That list was probably a catalyst for many people in terms of what they wanted. Did you ever feel like you were giving something up?
Yeah, safety and security, definitely. I mean, we had it really set. Also family, I grew up on the East Coast. So all of my friends and all of my family members lived on the East Coast, and my brother just had 2 kids. So some family members were even like, that's surprising. My son's only 6 years old. So we moved here when he was like 2.5, 3. And they thought that was strange that we would leave, because, you always think your family's going to help you and be your village. But that actually wasn't the case. Even though I had a lot of family, a lot of friends, we were very alone. We didn't have people to call on to help us and support us. And so the ironic thing was, within like a week of landing here, my son was already on his first sleepover. And the community is so open here. And we just, because I believe the values and priorities are different where we are in California versus New York. So even though we had family, a lot of it is, at least my experience was that it was about achievement. And it was really about getting your child in the best school, making the most money, having the nice house, which is fine. I don't judge that, but that wasn't my values. And those weren't my values or my family's values. And coming out here, we found that people were interested in community. People were interested in supporting each other. And we found community very, very quickly, which was kind of surprising, because we thought we were, sacrificing community in a way.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I've got a lot of follow-up questions for you, but we'll do it in the context of conversation. So thank you for sharing that. I do want to jump on over to Lisa next. Lisa, first, share with us why you felt compelled to answer my call and also how it is that you feel like you've changed your life, changed some aspect, and let us know what that is in order to support your child's education.
So I answered the call just because I checked off all the boxes. Yeah, I've been involved in alternative education. The way it worked for me is that it actually started when I was 8 years old because I switched from a small Montessori school to a big public school. And I was mercilessly bullied by the kids there. And I would say that my public school education was extremely difficult, to say the least. So when my oldest son was 3 years, was about 2.5, he was a very needy child and very, very, very active. And I knew that if I sent him to a regular school, it would be a problem. And I went around to the Montessori schools in the area, and they were all, because the name Montessori isn't trademarked, anyone can use it. And so the ones around me were highly academic, whereas my experience in my Montessori school was very much around flow, very much around child-led learning. And so my mother had become a Montessori teacher because of my experience. She was living on the East Coast. And so this was a great opportunity for her to come out and participate in the lives of my then 2 boys. So we really impulsively started this thing. We started it, we rented a room from a church for $500 a month. And we really didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, but my drive to make sure that my kids did not have the same experience that I did in public school was all that I cared about. And I left my then career. I was a fundraiser for political and social nonprofits and just threw myself completely into the school. And the school grew from 1 student in a rented classroom to a capacity of 90 children in 2 campuses within 5 years. So it was quite an experience, and in the process of it, I had another boy, so I ended up with 3 of them. But you know, the question of education has always been really important to me. I'm a multi-passionate person, and I've done many, many different things. I'm an artist. I have just had so much exposure to so many different things. I wanted my children to have a rich experience like that. So that was my motivation. And later on, when my children aged out of the school, they ended up in a charter, and I hit a kind of a crisis point when my youngest wanted to go to the public high school. And he has what's termed a learning disability, which means that he just doesn't go along with the regular conventional ways of learning. He's a brilliant musician and artist himself. And so I ended up pulling him from that high school, moving to a different town, and unschooling him, which was pretty challenging because that meant that I needed to let go of the academic expectations for this kid. But that was what was necessary. We actually had a situation in that public high school in which I filed a complaint against the school psychologist because they were not doing their job, and they blamed my child for it and attempted to classify him as being emotionally disturbed because they had not, and he wasn't emotionally disturbed. They were just putting that to basically cover their tracks. So it has been an incredible experience. And this last move from Pasadena to Ventura to do this unschooling meant that I really took an entire year off to get him sorted out. So It was absolutely worth it though, because I now have, 3 boys who are really thriving in their chosen field. So.
I wanted, I'm sorry, I wanted to ask you, Lisa, did you do that beautiful art behind you? It's
Yeah,
so
that's one of
pretty.
my paintings.
Wow, so you actually moved to another town so your child could attend another school. That's amazing. And
Well,
like,
it was more like getting him away from the children that he had met there, and it was necessary at that time. I mean, we're talking a really catastrophic situation. My son's also transgender, and so that was definitely an issue. And it was necessary to just kind of remove him from that environment. But I really, truly thought that I was going to lose him. And, it so mirrored my experience with public schools that, I was willing to really do something extreme to get him out of that situation.
amazing. What a beautiful story. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we're going to jump on over to Anne. Anne, why don't you go ahead and share with me what your story is, how you've supported your children in the past, and why you responded to this particular call out.
Okay. So I responded, I really jumped on it because I wanted to share my story, because I think, just like everybody on this panel, we're connected in so many ways. And I think there's a lot of parents out there that might not be happy with the current situation they're in, but just don't see any way to change it. And that's how I was for years and years. So that's why I wanted to share my story. So I've always worked with kids, and I've been passionate about supporting play for kids and sustaining that natural curiosity. So I've worked in a lot of different settings, and I had kids later in life as well. So my career was pretty set, and I was working as a developmental specialist, and I was working within systems to advocate for children. And it's funny now in hindsight, when I had my own kids, I just thought we would fit into those systems. I was really looking forward to being part of a community and having my kids go to school. And I thought it would just all work out. So my kids started at sort of an alternative school. And although the teachers were great, it just never felt completely right. I just felt like I was watching their curiosities and interests be shaped in ways that wasn't as natural. So I couldn't really put my finger on it. So for years, I just thought I needed to work, and that was it. I had to just keep advocating within the system. Well, finally, my husband and I, making lists and talking about what options were, I decided to leave my full-time work to homeschool the kids. And there's just a ton of uncertainty, but a ton of beautiful growth that has happened along that way. And, we started out trying to start an ALC. A friend of mine who's also unschooling her kids, we tried to start an ALC. When we read about what the Agile Learning Centers were doing, that sort of that articulated everything that I'd been feeling about how kids learned and self-directed education. So we had tried that here, and that didn't get off the ground. So now I'm consulting with other families who are homeschooling, and kind of in the position where I was, we're thinking that there wasn't options, but there are. And I guess we'll go into it later, but the way the kids and I have just grown into this lifestyle. I guess you could say now our values kind of align with our life now that we've left traditional schooling.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I love how everybody's story starts with their family, starts with their children, and sort of circles out to community and learning. And to me, that's powerful. I want to ask this panel, actually, before I ask the panel, let's jump on over to Beth and Christopher. Christopher, you're with us. So happy you joined us. Go ahead and share your story about how you've you've actually pretty much changed your life to support your idea of family and community. Go ahead and share a little bit more about your story.
So I responded originally, mainly thinking we're just regular people who kind of struggled through life and struggled to kind of make our way to do something for our kids that was very important to us. And I think had I known other people in the early days that had done something similar, that would have been really helpful to me. So that's what kind of encourages me to feel like I want to share what we are doing and what we have done, because we've experienced a lot of wonderful things even through and after a lot of terrible failures and the things not going how we would have wanted them to.
Yeah, so like she was saying, that struggling through life for us meant that we came from working class families, no higher education other than like trade school, attempts at college, attempts at community college, and then marriage, then kids, and then, oh, okay, well, are we going to put them in school when they get to that age? Are we not going to put them in school? If we're not going to put them in school, what are we going to do? And so we began to really look around for ideas. And at that stage of parenthood, you're surrounded often by well-meaning family members, well-meaning people in the community, neighbors, coworkers, who are already thinking pretty far ahead into the future and all have pretty set ideas about what should be done with the child as far as raising a child up to the age of about 5 or 6, and what you should do once you get to that stage. So it was a confusing time for us. And now if you put that together with some of the facts of our upbringing, I don't want to generalize too much, but coming from a working class family background, there isn't a lot of expectation toward your own future from your parents or other elders, other than, well, you're going to grow up and get a job, or you're going to go to college, or something. But you're just going to do what we did. You're going to do what your parents did. You're going to do what your grandparents did. You're just gonna figure it out, and we're going to raise you till you're 18, and then you're on your own. Yeah, good luck. So when we really began to talk about it, as we spent time with our children, we realized that there's got to be a better way than that. And then, so that's where Beth and I kind of had two divergent philosophies. From her perspective, it was just more of an intuitive approach. Well, it's something like,
I think very in line maybe with what Lisa was saying. I had a lot of desire to protect my kids and a lot of things that I didn't want them being exposed to, and I certainly didn't want to just send them off. I, remember eventually when we did send them to public school, it never was easy for me to watch them go away on the bus. I'm like, this stuff doesn't feel right to put you on this bus and there you go and have your day and we're separate. And so that was a lot of where my desire to do something different with them came from. And Christopher's approach had a lot more to do with fulfilling their curiosities and their education needs, which was a huge importance to balance, my motherly protection over them.
Yeah, they're going to grow up someday. That was my position. They're going to grow up someday, so they're going to need some preparation for the world, and that's where from there we set off, on our own, coming together at times to look for what options are out there. And we tried out a lot of different things, but what I found seemed to be the most true to life was Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences theory. I was excited when I read the book, The Unschooled Mind. I was excited as I learned more and more about it, but then I started to get discouraged because it didn't seem like there was any group or any institution. There wasn't like a homeschool program, and I was all new to this. I expected that there would be some place where people would be doing this whole in multiple intelligences thing, and there wasn't. Right? Yeah, I know. It's crazy because as I have struggled as a complete amateur to figure this thing out and how to put it together, and yeah, as a daily way of life, it gives us more and more and more all the time. It shows me how realistic it is in terms of dealing with your children. It really helps to respect the fact that the children come prepared to understand the world, and so what an adult's place in all of that is really to guide, to support, to set them up. And as they get more and more serious, going from a curious, intuitive interest in any particular domain of life, helping them to develop the discipline for themselves. But once again, along the lines of their interests and along the lines of what they intuitively seek out in the first place. So that's where we've eventually come to, but it's been really difficult. We've really had to change around everything that we do. We've had to change around how we earn money, so that we've had to become and remain self-employed so that we have the flexibility and the freedom to spend a lot of time with our children. Like Annie was talking about, saying that, we could just work our butts off, put them in school, and earn so that we can maybe take a vacation or something like that. But that's not what young children need from their parents in the early days. So yeah, we've really struggled. We've really had to change a lot of things. We've had to change how we think of ourselves as parents. We've had to change a lot of our assumptions. We've had to we've struggled a lot in our own marriage, in order to place the children first. It's been a struggle, but now, after all those years, we really do have a systematic approach to an intuitive way of life. It seems like a contradiction, but it really works for us.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you guys responded to my call. And of course, I was thinking, I'm listening to you going, oh, yeah, we did a show on multiple intelligences. Yes, you were on the show. Of course. Now I remember. Amazing. And I love how everybody is approaching it again from children first. I mean, it comes from this internal place. We're having kids. Anybody can have kids. It doesn't take talent to give birth to a child, but it does take commitment, and it does take that inner knowing and passion. So what I want to ask this panel is, coming from Christopher and Beth's, and also what Sweeta said about having that intuitive knowing, that drive to do something that was different than they thought that they were going to do before they had kids. Can you talk, I'm going to open this up to the panel, but can you talk a little bit about that intuitive knowing and how the intuition, once you have kids, changes and reveals to you a different path that perhaps you never would have even thought about? And I'm not just talking about in reaction to a situation. I'm talking about that knowing that, oh yeah, this is where I'm going. This is what we're doing. This is where we have to be, not in reaction, but being proactive. So I'm going to open that up to the panel.
I guess I'll start. So, I think for a lot of people, especially if you live in a place that's conventional and mainstream, it's, I don't feel this to be the case where I'm in California now, but to say like, I have a feeling, like, I just know this is why I'm going to do this. There's a lot of doubt and resistance towards that of like, well, where's the proof? Where's the safety, et cetera? And then when you have a family and you have a mortgage to pay for and you're trying to make a life, and, you know, safety becomes like a security, stability becomes like such a big priority that it can sometimes get even more like, you might even have more resistance towards listening to your intuition. However, I do think that as a society, we do honor something. We honor mother's intuition. Like, people know what mother's intuition is. And, you know, there's that whole like the mama bear thing. And I think oftentimes we don't honor our intuition for ourselves, but I think something happens when you have a child, because you know that your job is to keep that child healthy, safe, and to create an environment to guide them. I too do believe that kids come in with to teach us something. And I know, like I always say, I birthed my son, but he gave me life, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have known that I was totally on the wrong path of life. So it was actually, I feel like he was like my big soul slap in the face, you know, to say, Mommy, you're on the wrong path. And like, you know, you almost, you know, because you were so disconnected from yourself, you were so disconnected from your body, like you didn't, because I was working so hard. That was the thing. That's the reason why I really believe that he, you know, almost died in my womb, is because I was working so hard. Because when I found out I was pregnant, and I think I inherited this coming from an immigrant family, of it's always about making enough money for your child. And that fear kicked in for me, even though that wasn't my reality. Like, my reality was that I had created a lifestyle with savings and whatnot, but the fear of like, how am I going to pay for his education? It was like controlling me to work so hard, and it disconnected me from that intuition. And so I really believe that, you know, our kids, and just, you know, coming from a energetic perspective, our womb, you know, in mothers, that's an energy center. That's all about creativity and relationships and resources, the second chakra. And for me personally, I feel like that activated that within me, that and my experience was I went to a gifted school. I was like in an honors program. I had always done the highly educational aspect, but my creativity was completely suppressed and repressed. And I had that's why in my bio I say like an accidental writer. I had no idea that was even within me. But I really believe that like becoming a mother awakened that creativity, which I think is very strongly connected to intuition, connected to the universal intelligence as well. And so having a child, I think, automatically kind of connects you to that. And we know that because, like I said, we accept mother's intuition. And so it's just really, I think, about extrapolating that into a broader perspective as well.
So on that note of a broader perspective, I really feel like Christopher brought in a huge balance that I never would have had without him, because I did have an intuition of what I wanted for my kids, that it felt natural for me to want to be with them, but I lacked a lot of the wisdom or the examples growing up, not really having any role models and things like that, of how to actually do that, you know, and I was satisfied just being with them, but that was not enough for my kids. And I knew that it wasn't enough, but I didn't know what to do about it. And so I was just happy with, you know, let's just have them at home and we'll just keep struggling through. We'll do the best we can. And so Christopher's comment earlier that they were going to grow up someday, you know, without his foresight into that, I feel that my intuition would have just let me be comfortable taking care of them and providing the basic needs, but not really giving them a fulfilling life that, you know, hopefully we will be able to give now that we, you know, have made all these changes.
I'd also like to say that for me, a lot of that was inborn. It was intuitive for me to look at our situation, our context, and, you know, feeling like we had to start from within our own family to come up with something original that would grow out of this intuition that we both share, that like, yes, we love our children. We don't want to just assume that the best thing to do is to throw them into an industrialized school system and back up the school system, instead of backing up the kids. I think that Lisa touched upon that when she was talking about the troubles, the difficulties that she had with one of her children in school and the school psychologist. It puts the parents into a choice where you have to pick a side. You have to pick your child's side or you have to pick the school side. And we both just felt, like hearing stories like that, having gone through our own experiences, that's not right. But I also have this weird urge that I didn't understand at the time to follow through on that, to cultivate something that would help them cultivate themselves. So yeah, it was, even though it's grown into a structured way of life, a path, it is born and it continually is reborn from a place that's just within both of our hearts.
I just want to say, I remember a parent asked me of one of the kids in our school, like, how do I know, how this is the right thing for my kid? And I just looked back over my parenting and I thought, like, whenever I had my first kid, I was in Louisiana in a pretty conservative area, and there were certain ideas about how to parent, about like, people would be like, how long are you going to nurse? And I would say, oh, I guess a year at the most. I really hadn't thought about it. And I had people giving me like a bassinet because that's what you did. Nobody did like the things that I started to intuitively feel were right. Like I did nurse past a year because it didn't feel right to stop after a year, and continued on. And I did start to co-sleep because I just felt right. And then I started to find like all of these resources that supported my decision, I guess, in like the attachment parenting world, and started to find more communities that also like kind of came to these same conclusions that I did on my own. So I developed a lot of trust for like just being in tune with like what felt right with me and my kid. And the same thing as like I started to do the homeschooling thing with my kid, and that kind of turned into an unschooling thing. And so yeah, it just feels like it just keeps building, and I keep building more and more like a stronger sense of my intuition and trusting it more.
As I'm sitting here listening to all of you, what I realized is that, yes, when I had my first child, I opened up my intuition because I so wanted to have children, and I didn't have parents around me. I was really, really isolated. Nobody I knew had children, and so I did my usual thing back before the internet and got 14 books from the library, and luckily ended up looking at attachment parenting works and ended up, being a La Leche League leader. And it really flowed from there. I really surrendered to, okay, I wanted this child so much. I want these children so much. I am going to surrender to what they need, right? Not to the extent of them taking over the house or something like that, but following what they truly needed. And what I was just reflecting that everything, my first business was starting the school, but then my second business was as a health coach, and I did it because I wanted to be home and available for them. And then this career as an intuitive, the reason that one happened is because my youngest son was having so many challenges. It was so very difficult. And one of the things that I discovered through some friends is that he is highly intuitive, highly sensitive, and how I could work with that so that it becomes a strength rather than something that cripples him. Because in a certain sense, I was crippled by my sensitivity when I was young. So I've been led by my children, and it's created a completely different life than I ever would have expected. So yes, I totally agree that the experience of having children opened up that second chakra, and the creativity came pouring out after that.
So, again, as I'm listening to everybody talking about intuition, it's just huge, I think, in parenting. And what I find is so often in society, we're sort of taught out of our intuitive abilities. And so we think, this is the way you're supposed to do it, even though you've got this gut feeling that's telling you no. And I feel like that's what drove me to homeschooling, because I never thought I would homeschool. I advocated for children, but I thought my kids needed to go to school. But when they were going intuitively, it didn't feel right. It didn't have that flow. And so even once we started homeschooling, I still had an idea in my head of what it should look like. But I really learned to pay attention to how I feel when I'm with my kids, because it's those feelings that guide us. So if my kids and I are doing something and it's not feeling right, I really pay attention to that, because intuitively my whole body and being knows that it's not the right thing to be doing. So my kids, like everyone else is saying, have really opened up so many doors for me and sort of highlighted what I intuitively knew all along, but just didn't know how to articulate it.
Of course I wanted to, take a break and move on, but I have a follow-up question that I need to know. So for me, it was the same way. It was, my intuition really was awakened when I actually got pregnant, I knew where my path was leading me, and I suddenly had this inner strength and this knowing that wasn't there before, prior to being pregnant. And of course it developed through having being a mother. I developed the intuition and the listening to the inspiration too, which went hand in hand. So my question is, for me, the process was I was dealing as a parent with all of the parenting stories of the should-haves, not the should-haves, but you should, this is how to do things. And, as I became an unschooling parent, I went through the deschooling of all of those thoughts. But what my question really is to this panel is, what kind of outside messages did you have to process through and then release or get rid of in order to be on the path that you're on? And so I'm just going to open that wild one up to the panel as well. So jump in.
Well, I had an issue with my ex-husband, who was really concerned about their academic achievement. And I've just never been the kind of person, I'm not the kind of mom who's going to follow them around and beat them over the head if they haven't done their homework. So that was a challenge for me. And I think eventually the unschooling path that I've taken with my youngest has been very difficult, even with my mom, even with family members who basically understand it, because I think that Andrew is one of the new children that's coming in. He is not left brain at all. He is an intuitive, he's an energy healer, he's a musician. And so it required me to, I had it within myself. Oh my God, his skills in math are horrible. How is he going to survive? And I was like, well, plenty of people survive fine. And allowing him to just explore I wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing if it weren't for him. But it really, I've been challenged all along, particularly with this youngest kid, to really examine my beliefs and to really say, do I believe this, or is this just something that, is this like some social program that has been imposed on me? And also, I have a very strong belief that the world is going through a tumultuous upheaval and a shift, and that this unschooling, the new approach to children, is absolutely necessary to get us into the next era where humans can fully express themselves instead of being programmed in the public schools to be factory workers.
So for us, we really had to let go of that need for certainty or to know my kids are going to be happy. And when I realized I can't make my kids happy, it's in them, that helped a lot. We've had definitely family members who don't understand what we're doing. So we've had to kind of let go of needing to sort of defend what we're doing and just do it. So kind of like you were saying, Lisa, family members who think that, oh, we're harming our kids or they're not going to be successful. They're not prepared for the world. I had to just sort of let go of holding on to those stories, because the reality is, I know my kids are living in the real world. They're living it, they're experiencing it. And I know there's a depth to that, but it's letting go of the traditional idea of what it means to be educated. So, and then the possibilities that open up when we let go of that rigid idea of what it means to be educated or to learn. My kids, I can't even begin to go into how deep they've gone into learning. So letting go of all those stories and letting go of the need to know what's going to happen next, because we just don't in life.
I think the most consistent way I've been challenged on this has been around academics. So are they gonna learn math? Are they gonna be able to read? And what if they don't and they miss out on all these things? And there was definitely intuition that kind of got me through, but there's also a lot of research and that kind of looked at these things, and then there wasn't really that much of a problem. But it wasn't really until I started seeing over the last couple of years firsthand how this works that I'm finally feel a lot more confident about these things. So it's every day in my life now. I'm seeing these kids get interested in reading and in math and all these things that are supposedly academics, because it's just in their environment, it's in their world, and it's all around them. And they're just they're curious about it, like they're curious with anything else. It's just it comes at different ages and at different levels of curiosity. But that to me, just seeing that unfold was kind of for me the last challenge. And it's kind of like, hey, I can point now to something in my immediate life that that satisfies that, and I don't have to make up or to talk about hypothetical examples anymore.
Yeah, we've had a similar experience as well. But I just wanted to go back a little while to what Lisa was talking about there just being, this is like we're on the verge of an entirely different world. And I think that part of what we've had to do, what I've had to do especially in the realm of intuition, is accept that I can know all by myself without approval from anybody, that I know what's going on. I know the right path to take, that I know what's good for the children, that I get them, that I can get them, that I'm able to get them, and that I'm able to get them in the context of the world that we're in, the world that we're living in. And so it's okay to not totally ignore what everyone around me is doing or what they think is best, but I can disregard. I can set it aside and say, I think I know. I'm looking at my own life. I'm looking at the reflection that the both of us, that what our children are reflecting back to us about what we are intuitively doing in influencing their lives and the way that they go. And the result has been close to what Hanny's just described, where they're taking an interest in the things around them and wanting to dig deeper and find out how they work. And then that provides us with an opportunity to explain, to show, to lead, direct. And that came from a place where one day we put our foot down in our own lives, our feet down in our own lives, and we said, we're just going to trust ourselves. We're going to trust ourselves. And unless we're totally nuts, it's actually going to work out pretty good. And so far, I don't think we're totally nuts.
Just to finalize that statement is like, even in trusting ourselves, like going back to what Lainey said, is I personally, for myself speaking, I had gone through public school and was a pro at being a follower. And so even trusting myself and relating to Lainey's question is like, what did you have to change in your mind? And I couldn't even list it. Everything almost that I've ever known, every pattern of behavior that I developed as a skill and something that I was probably pretty proud of, like straight A student and all these things, I had to totally reconfigure that entire thing that, you know, I was trained to believe that life was all about. So it wasn't, it's easy to make it sound simple, like, yes, we trusted our intuition, but it was a lot of hard work and attention and time and patience and struggle.
Yeah, we had to kill a part of ourselves that was trying to block that out, you know. Maybe that was a little harsh, but yeah, you know, it was tough.
I'd like to add to that. I think for myself and my husband, our biggest thing was to overcome our own projections of what our experience was, to see what is best for our son, you know. And so for me, like, I was bullied tremendously, and I had so much schooling, and so for me, it's like, I want to be completely free. I want to just travel the world, which we did when my son was like 2.5. We took him around. He's been to 15 countries already. But my husband was kind of like that balancing for me as well, of like, he needs structure, and he does. Like, my son is wild and he needs some structure. And so we are in the system. He goes to a public school. But what's been really amazing was to learn how to not only trust ourselves, but also trust others and trust, you know, the bigger or divine orchestration. And just to kind of give an example of this, when my son went to kindergarten, there was a teacher, and I kind of prayed that he would get that teacher. And he did get that teacher, and she was great. But what I did differently was, when he went into first grade, was I prayed that he gets the teacher that he needs, as opposed to like who I like. Made a huge difference, because right now because he was born premature in New York, in California, they have something called transitional kindergarten, like a TK, and he didn't qualify for that. But had he been born on his birth date, his due date, he would have. So the teacher, you know, the teacher has gone to bat for him, because she has a highly sensitive child, and she has kept such a close eye on him. And even though, because there's a backlog, because he's in the system, you know, they have a student success team, they couldn't evaluate him. She said, no, like, I don't feel good about letting him go into second grade. And she went to the principal, and she's working with us. And so we're working with the teacher and the system to do what's best for our son. And so he's repeating a year next year, and I feel really good about that. But, you know, my ego, which came up with my husband as well, of like, oh, well, how is that going to look for him? You know, and like, how is that going to be socially for him? And that was like our issues, not my son. Because when we asked our son, he was like, I love Miss Maya. How do you feel about doing another year? I love it. You know, and for his own self-esteem, because he's a Leo, he needs that leadership. Like, he's going to be a leader in the class next year, which is going to, I think, really support him. So it's been an interesting journey of like learning to trust self, but then also learning to trust others as well.
Wow. And then we find that the ego gets attached to the old stories oftentimes, and that's what we're battling with, not with what's in front of us.
Exactly.
So thank you, everybody. We're going to take a short break. We're going to watch a video. And this video, as I said in the introduction, was filmed in Asheville when my son Miro and I were there, and we met Hani and Kelly. And this is a short interview with them. But I do want to point out how proud I am of my fabulous son and his interviewing skills. So, and of course, the wonderful interviewees. So do enjoy this interview. And we've got a lot to talk about when we come back. So we'll see you in about 6.5 minutes.
here with...
Hani Naguib from Zigzag ALC.
So I'm sitting here on this beautiful log in this beautiful forest with Kelly. She and her partner founded this place. But first, maybe do you want to tell me a little bit about your history with alternative education and what kind of drew you towards that to begin with?
I always thought of like democratic schools or like Montessori Waldorf were all kind of similar and just alternative, you know. And I was always attracted to all of them, and each for different reasons. But when I actually had children and was like started out just wanting to, you know, be involved in their education and doing homeschooling, really, I guess is what I started out as. And then I was noticing just how when I would do things like, I remember downloading some curriculum stuff like homeschool preschool and like having your kid like trace letters or something with their finger, and I thought my kid was not interested in like, you know, like he liked to paint or he liked to work with clay, but it's like he didn't always want to combine it with like a letter or a number or a shape. And I just felt really like ridiculous doing it. I just felt a sense of like, you know, just with all my parenting, I guess, like I just really trusted my own sense about it. And so I was like, okay, well, this obviously is not, you know, no reason for me to be pointing out letters when he's interested in so many other things. Like it was obvious that he was always learning, and for me to be like always imposing like this particular agenda of like alphabet, numbers, and shapes, like just didn't felt off.
Yeah, so we've done peaceful parenting with our kids since they were born. I didn't have a very good childhood and really wanted to teach that with my kids, and it was easy for us to do peaceful parenting and to really plug in with you know, kind of follow what our kids' needs and desires are, and we had the space in our lives to do that.
Sometimes people see what Hani and I doing. What we're doing is like we're being like super parents, like trying to put like so much into the parenting thing, and a lot of them just like, that's not my thing. Like I'm not into parenting. I don't want to like. I have my own passions. I don't want to help my kids pursue their passions, and you know, I guess that part of to me that is like, it's like, I enjoy being a parent and this is my passion. So I see myself as a little different than the typical parent in some ways. It's fine. Like, you know, if you don't want to like stay with your kid all the time and help them like in this journey as much, and you have your own things you want to do, but they still have like an alignment with the philosophy, and like I feel like this is a great space for those kind of families.
Both of my kids are kind of on the shy side, and we realized after a few years that doing this at home is really not enough. It's I really believe like we evolved in a tribe of like 50, 100 people, and just having this nuclear family, even if we're doing it perfectly, you know, it's not enough to feed them, and so we started looking at schooling options, and we live in Asheville, and there were lots of school options, but nothing really felt quite right to us. There was a lot of even the alternative schools in Asheville still come from the same place of like, we, the grown-ups, know what developmental stage you're at, what you're ready to be learning, and to, you know, and we're gonna feed you that, or we're gonna, you know, you're not ready for this other thing yet because you're not like there, that age range, and it's just like a lot of it felt like still holding on to that idea of grown-ups know better, and we really wanted to reverse that. Like we really wanted to follow the lead of individual kids and kind of feed them and support them with where they're at.
That's great. That's great. And what was it exactly about the ALC style, if you will, that really attracted you towards it? What were some of the greatest points?
So we are totally bought into the free school, Sudbury School idea, and we visited a whole bunch of them, and the idea of the kids leading and the kids being free is essential.
I felt a sense of engagement from the facilitators that I hadn't felt as much in other kind of just pure like democratic schools. I really appreciated that. I also really liked that there wasn't a lot of time on meetings. I liked the agile nature of it, that, you know, decisions were made kind of temporarily, agreements were made, let's see if they work. If they don't work, let's change them. It felt more natural in the way we actually lived and worked as a family, really.
How would you describe the interpersonal relationships between the facilitators and the children?
I would say that's probably like the biggest thing we're offering here is a relationship, is a real connection. It's you know, I am someone that they can come and talk to if they're having trouble figuring something out, you know, or if like there's something they're really excited about and they want to know more, like, or like share it with me, or I don't know, I feel it's just more like an extension of my parenting, I guess. Like.
And as a very involved parent, what would you say is just the single best thing about being involved hands-on in your child's education?
I think just the connection with them. Like I feel like we're really a family that we do things together all the time. Like this artificial separation that happens when kids are school aged. I'm like, oh, now you go off and you do your thing and I'm gonna do my thing. I don't think that doesn't feel very good to me, and it's not by any means restricting it to the family. So the whole idea of the school is to expand our family and to be a bigger community. So we're doing this all together in a bigger community, but we're all very connected with each other. So it's kind of like a bigger family where I get to really connect with them in so many different ways. You know, only when we want to connect with each other, but it's always available. That option is always there, and that's great.
So we hope you are as inspired as we were. I think the project that Kelly and Hani are working on is incredible. One thing that struck me that really inspired this conversation that we're having here with this wonderful panel is when Kelly said that people look at her as she's a super parent, that she comes from, you know, this, I'm phrasing of course, but she comes from this place where, yes, her kids are important. And yes, she does want to step out on a limb and support them. And I want to talk about that from two different perspectives with this panel. All of the people that answered my call for parents that are dedicated to their children and do whatever it takes to support their alternative or to support their education and support them in one way or another answered this because they have that inner drive to really be dedicated to their children. But not every parent is like that. And I love how there are programs, and Hani and Kelly's program were set up to support other kids as well that align with the same values. And I'm sure Lisa created her Montessori school in order to support, you know, families that aligned with those values and so forth. How do we support parents in our community? My question is, how do we support parents in our community that don't have the same dedication that we do as parents? And how do we do it in such a way that we do not shame them because their focuses are elsewhere? Either it's on their career or they have different values, and that's okay. And let's face it, we're all bringing in the next generation of leaders. So how do we support parents and one another in such a way that we can open up that dedication and create a bigger community? So I'm just going to open that up to the panel, and I'm going to let whoever wants to take that first.
One of the things we have done with our school, with our kids, is we focus a lot on community building and nonviolent communication and conflict resolution and things like that. And we did that exclusively in the school the first year. And then this year, we started expanding beyond that. We started having meetings with the parents and the families where we actually talk about like NVC skills and how we use the same being authentic with each other and all of that with the grown-ups as well. So it started out as like, well, that's an extension of what we do with the kids, and the homes should be aware of that too. But then at this point, I feel like it's taken a life of its own. There's this extended community now, and all these families are really interested in doing that with each other, not just with the kids. So even married couples, or like there was a 3-generation family that we had where they did that. So all these skills that we talk to the kids about can go beyond that and can be like a community kind of effort focus.
Yeah, like Hanny was saying, I think it's all about collaboration. And I've had parents say to me a lot, like, oh, I can't do what you do. I don't have the patience, or I'm not cut out for that. But the bottom line is we all love our kids, and we're all in relationship with our kids. So it's how do we support each other in strengthening those relationships in our family and with our kids, and it's collaboration. So, one thing I learned when I started homeschooling, I thought I could never do it, and I just didn't have a support system. But now I have found this whole homeschooling community, and we all support each other. And I was so afraid to ask for help in the beginning, because there are moms who do things that I don't do, and there are things that I do that other parents don't do. So it's just about connecting, communicating, collaborating, because in the end, we all love our kids, and we're stronger together than individually.
For us, it's more about, our friendships, our social connections, all of our children's friends. They're all families that are involved in traditional schooling. So by maintaining those relationships, we're able to communicate other values and trade ideas. And we hear a lot of those comments like, wow, gosh, I don't know how you guys do this. And wow, that's really great. But on the other hand, we also see there's also an exchange. There's an exchange of the ideas that we value in our own home, such as conflict resolution, independence, and self-direction. All of those things are ways that we're able to communicate what we do while still and be able to do what we do while remaining a part of the community at large, and not necessarily having to seek out and depend upon some sort of like alternative community.
One of our favorite quotes that we like to remind ourselves of is, one flower blooms and it's spring everywhere. And so by that, we try to just continue working on our flower and know that, once we are in full bloom, it's just going to spread.
Somebody's going to smell it. It's going to be all right. They'll like it.
Yes, I just wanted to add to this idea of like not shaming parents because they're not doing more, because is like, I feel it's super important for parents to realize that, that they're, whatever they're doing, if they're doing their own passions, that's awesome. That's good for your kids too. And it just so happens that like with Hanny and I, our passion is our kids' education and being with them and, supporting their passions. But like, it's also, important and beautiful to be doing whatever your own, passion is, and to be showing up for yourself, and so you can show up for your own kids.
Yeah, that's super important. Sweta, did you want to add to that?
I think it's just, the process that I've created and is called Unique Harmony. And for me, that's really about like, even within our own family systems, we're all individuals. And it's like, how can we live harmoniously while honoring our own unique makeup? And I think it goes such a long way to be able to, like what we're doing here, just sharing our stories so that others can know what's possible, and they can say, well, there's part of what I resonate with what Anne said, or resonate with Hattie said, and as opposed to like, I need to be like this person, or I need to be like that person. And to just be willing to listen to, like, I'm passionate about specifically like moms with young children, because I really feel like something happens when you become this mom. And like, I hear so many stories of they're trying to focus on finding maybe a part-time job or starting a business, when what they're really wanting to do is find a way where they can be with their children, but also create kind of a secure environment. And just like having these conversations, real conversations within whatever communities we are in, and to create possibilities for each unique family, like, what do you want and how can we support you and help you to achieve that? And there's a book called Wishcraft. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called Wishcraft. And there's this thing where you do is they're called idea parties, where every, community just comes together and says, this is what I want to create. This is what I want to create. And the idea is by just speaking into a community that's supportive of what you want, connections get created that way. And they say, well, I know somebody who can help you with that, or you could talk to this person, or you could talk to that person. And then suddenly what didn't become possible becomes possible. And not like judging what a person wants because it's different than what you want, but saying like, that's great. That's how can I support you in creating that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it is really important. Again, I'm really pro, let's not shame anybody for choosing a different path. But those of us that are in this community that have a strength, see how we can support other families by using our strength. In my case, I love working with teens, and you have no idea how many times parents have said to me, what are you doing with all these teenagers? I want to get as far away as I can from all the teens. And I feel exactly the opposite. I draw energy from their energy. I love being their mentor. For me, the stage of development, the teenage adolescent development to me is so important. And I connect with that in such a way that it allows me to mentor. So, with young kids, that's not what I do. I like little kids, and I'm glad that mine's not little anymore, but it's the teens that I love working with. So whatever it is, wherever we find our strengths, by all means, let's support everybody and utilize our strengths. I think it's great. And I see everybody here doing that. I have a final question before we get to our final thoughts. But my question is, one of the things that I help families in terms of world schooling do is help them articulate and define what their family culture is. And families that have never thought about that before find this an interesting and exciting exercise, because you get to declare and define what it is that you do and what the values are of your family. And I'm going to put all of you panelists on the spot. I'm going to have you go around and declare and share what your family culture is. And I'm sure that there's going to be lots and lots of similarities and crossovers. So who wants to be put on the spot first?
Okay, I'll share, because our family values are sticking up on the wall right now. And I would tell you that is probably, that's a similar what I do, is because there's so many families that don't actually know what they value. And so it's hard for them to discern whether is this kind of structure right or is that structure right. So I think it's a very powerful, just like making a list of writing out what you want is so powerful. So our family values are kindness and equality, joy, respect and trust, adventure, and integrity. And my son actually climbed up and wrote love as well. So that just goes to show you, at 5 years old, he was like, he had something to add. So yeah, those are ours.
For us, family culture is mainly about togetherness. It's about looking out for each other. It's about knowing yourself in order to be able to relate with everyone else. And so, you know, we do things like, we do simple meditation. We spend a lot of time in nature. We do a lot to help one another, not only around the house, but with things that one child might know that the other children could use. You know, I didn't teach any of my kids to ride a bike. They all taught each other. And so simple things like that, just a way of care, you know, a culture of care. That's what we call it, because it really is a value that can be expressed in many activities, and in all of the interactions that they have with themselves and others. Do you care? You know, if you care, you're going to think about things. You'll take pause. You'll be able to stop an argument. You'll be able to learn from an argument. You'll be able to give criticism that's intended to help the other person more than you'll be likely to give criticism that's intended to poke and punch and pass on some kind of anger. So that's, you know, we could say kindness. We could say a lot of things through which that care is expressed, but we always try to keep it narrowed down to care. That's the culture.
So I guess I'll jump in here. That's a big question, Lainey, and I think for us, it's our family culture is constantly evolving, but I'd say it's really based on knowing who you are. It's knowing who you are. It's awareness. It's about connection. Really is important in our family, and so it's funny. This question, I've never really defined it, because it's a feeling that's there. It's this feeling of compassion for others really begins with who you are, knowing yourself and understanding yourself. So I guess I'd say our culture, family culture, is built on being true to yourself and true to others.
It's funny, we kind of started off, we didn't really discuss this as a family values for ourselves, but when we started the school, we came up with 3 words that were kindness, connection, and nature. And I think that kind of reflects as well just really what our family was about when we started the school, and continues to be. And also I would say, we couldn't fit this in on the slogan really, but what Anne was saying about knowing yourself, that was a big, that's the big driver in our family, like reflective and doing what it is we really love to do, sharing that.
And I would add to that one too, this idea of autonomy, that we are individual people with separate needs, and we are living in this family community where helping each other meet our needs feels really good too. So it's kind of always being aware of this balance of internal needs and the needs of others around us, and how we can, and that those are never in conflict, that we can actually support each other in meeting all these needs. And that's what family is to me.
Yeah, I'm particularly on the spot because, number one, I think I'd like to think about this and write about it. But also, my kids are out of the house. My youngest is 18, and he's been with my mom for the last 3 months. So in a certain sense, it's, you know, our culture has changed a lot because we're all living in different places now. But it is, it's always based on, I think, intense curiosity about each other and who we are, and supporting each other, because I come from a family of radicals, really. I mean, my parents did some pretty wild things in the 60s in terms of music and culture. So, and now there is a bond, and I think that what ties us together is inquisitiveness about ourselves and the world and our role in it. And that's really what we're about. So.
Yeah, I knew I was putting everybody on the spot with this question, and thank you for stepping up to the plate and actually taking a risk and defining that with me. I'm really grateful. And I guess to be fair, I should probably share with you what ours is. Ours is about connection, connectivity, authenticity, and presence. So that has evolved over the years. I mean, we got all our little subculture, like themes as well. But those are the big ones. Those are the big ones, and they've evolved over the years. So, yeah. We just have time to go around to each of our panelists, and I'm going to ask you to share with us some final thoughts. And again, the purpose of having these conversations is to put out into the universe alternative ways of parenting and educating, but it really comes from the place of the family first, and that's what the focus of this particular show is about. And so if there, I want you to final thought, and you're speaking to somebody who may be stepping outside of conventional education into more of an alternative modality and is perhaps a little afraid of following what their intuition is telling them. So speak to that person. So that would be your final thought. And then after your final thought, please share your projects and websites. And I will remind everybody who's watching the show that you can get the links at the show notes page. So who would like to go first? Final thoughts and projects and websites.
I'll go ahead. So my final thought is, number one, I'm just so inspired because when I started in education 20 years ago, I was, completely out there, total weirdo. Unschooling was very uncommon. So it's really exciting to see this movement growing. And, my belief is right now we're going through a paradigm shift in which the old institutions are crumbling. They don't work. Education is not working. And so I would stress to all of you that, yeah, it's the unknown is frightening because we've been living in this bubble for so long. But we get to create the new institutions. We get to create the future for our kids and for this country and, rippling out. And so, to me, that is very important for people to understand where, yes, it's a little bit scary. We're stepping into the unknown, but we can create something new where children will thrive and their creativity will not be squelched. And I have, a lot of opinions about public schools, but anyway. So right now what I'm working on, I'm an intuitive mentor, and my right now what I'm noticing is that many people are having intuitive skills opening up. We're all in a crisis because of the political, economic, the environment. And so a lot of people are being shocked awake. And I'm beginning a membership to develop people's capacity to understand intuitive information and to begin to expand their awareness of reality by understanding that it's not limited by our senses. And so I am teaching intuition development, energy work development, and work with helper energies such as guides. And you can find my work at lisacwolf.com. I also have a Facebook page, and the membership group that I am creating is called the Wolf Pack. So you can look me up.
Okay. So, Lainey, to answer the question, what would I say to a parent? I guess I would start with I often have parents kind of start to dig deep, like, what is it that you want for your kids? Because I think we're conditioned a lot of the time what society says our kids should be doing. So it's kind of taking that step back to like, what are your values as a parent? Do you value this, or is this what the school or society or parenting books is saying you should be doing? Like, so, number one, really getting in touch with your values, because I've worked with a lot of families who try to homeschool, but they're homeschooling in ways that don't doesn't really fit their values, and they're not sure what they think. So there's a lot of unraveling that has to happen first on the parents' end. And then stepping back and really observing your kids, because a lot of times, most of the time, they're doing incredible things right in front of our eyes, but because we have an agenda or we have an idea of what it should look like, we're not seeing what's happening right in front of us. And I'm amazed every day when I watch my kids and see what they're learning and see the amazing people that they are. And when I let my fears take over, I don't see everything that's right in front of my eyes. So, just really helping parents. We're all in the same boat. I think we all get caught up in the same fears. And, when you start talking to people, we're all experiencing the same thing. So I think just helping a parent start to dig a bit deeper is where I would go. And like Lisa was saying, it is exciting. There's so many different opportunities now and options for kids and self-directed learning and, online resources, that there's so much out there to fit so many different learning styles. So I'm really optimistic about that. And some of the projects that I'm working on right now, I'm actually consulting with families who are either homeschooling or really want to take that leap or are curious about what other options are. So I do consulting through Origins Homeschool Consulting, and you can find that at it's originhomeschoolconsulting.com. And I do that with a business partner. And then I also work with families individually just around parenting and behavior and sort of get parents who are more interested in more conscious ways of parenting. I work individually with them as well. And I'm working with teens teaching mindfulness and presence and awareness. And I work with a partner who does equine assisted learning. So we do some studio mind body yoga work, some mindfulness lessons, and then we work with the horses using our energy to connect. So I do all of that.
To answer the question of a parent who's kind of like maybe stepping into this world, I think that the first thing that comes to mind is trust. So remember when your kid was starting to walk or maybe starting to talk, and you completely trusted that process, and you as a parent was there to encourage it and to help and to support it. That doesn't end at talking or walking. It's a lifelong thing. We just had this system where it said, oh, that stops at 6, and now we got to take over. And that's actually not true. There's a lot of evidence that it's not true, and a lot of personal experiences. The curiosity is intact. It doesn't go anywhere. And the more we support it, and the more we trust the kids for what their interests are and what they want to pursue, that just keeps going. And so a lot of it to me is about trusting and really and seeing, like Anne said too, and watching and seeing them actually do amazing things while you hold them and support them. That's the one that comes to.
I would also add, for us, it was really about having information. Living in a was really doing what we were feeling like we wanted to be doing, but we traveled. Did we go visit schools that were doing things that we thought were interesting, inspiring, and trying to meet other parents at like family unschooling camps is some of the things we were into and we're going to, and of course the online communities, and just maybe putting yourself out there more, wherever you live, about, hey, this is what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, and all the Facebook mom groups. I feel like that's really helped us too in our journey.
And the project that we're most involved in right now is Zigzag ALC. It's a self-directed education school that we started last year, ages 3 to 12, and we're really excited for anybody to come just visit and spend the day. It's we have an amazing 10-acre campus, and we're doing all these things every day with kids, and it's we're very open about grown-ups and kids coming into the space and just not just seeing what we are doing, but getting involved too if they're interested for a day or a week or whatever. It's a very open community in Asheville, North Carolina.
So something that I think is an important thing that I'd like to bring to any parent is that it doesn't matter where you came from and what has happened prior to whatever moment that you make the decision to do something different, that nothing prior needs to define you. And additionally, you know, that sounds just very motivational, but the reality behind that is we have to be willing to accept that nothing is an overnight. If you are coming from a major deficit of any sort, which I think the whole world to a degree is, because this is not just the norm. And so to swim upstream, you're having some sort of deficit. And if you are coming from a deficit, it's a process, you know, and you have to go from A to Z, not you have to do the B and the C and the D and the E. You don't just get from A right to Z immediately and everything is great. And I feel that that's a big value of our having gone through this whole process and documented and creating systems for our family, is that the system that has been born out of that is something that hopefully would lead other families in that same direction. It addresses kind of the main domains of life, and I'll let Christopher maybe explain a little bit more about that to help you make those sorts of transitions in your life from wherever you're coming from and whatever your end goal really is. It can walk you through that process.
Yeah, what we do, we call it the Role Model Project. And really, it's just within our own family, but it is based on something that's well known, the multiple intelligence theory by Howard Gardner. We have participated in public school. We've done this. We've tried other things. And so, like she's saying, the important thing for us was to do what was best. And you know, balancing between our intuition and what's actually occurring around us, and judging based on those two things what's really right. And that's how we do this, and that's, I think, how anyone would really find. That's like a general thing that I think anybody could do to find their way and to really feel confident that they're finding their way. So we would love to share this with others. We're just getting started, beginning to do that, so we don't really have a lot of information on the web. But if you're interested, you can get in touch with us at West Seattle Core Collectors at gmail.com.
And our role model approach is strictly, Lainey had mentioned in our bio that we had kind of three approaches that we use. Role model is for schooling, so that's how we bring the kids up, and that's how we direct them and help them to direct themselves in their curiosities and learning and coming from their own intuition to their own understanding. Then we have a natural approach, which is what we use in regards to our family culture and our meditations and the intent with which we want to exist in the world, you know, how we go about affecting others in our family and the world around us. So that's the natural approach. And then
the old school approach.
The old school approach. Our old school approach is body, health, nutrition, and we found that through integrating all three areas, that was the only way to do it. You know, the kids' nutrition has to be part of our nutrition. Their learning has to be part of our life. Our work has to be part of their life. And so we try to put all three of those approaches together to just live life, essentially.
Okay, so I guess what I would say is for anyone that's like just considering doing something different than what they know is, one, to just really realize that your kids are resilient And so like be willing to experiment and maybe get it wrong, because I don't really think there's such a thing as wrong. Either way, I think you're teaching your kid, so even if it's not the perfect kind of scenario, there's something that your child's going to learn from you and your willingness to not get it perfect as well. I think that's a life learned skill that can really go very far. And so I really think, again, like just experimenting and a lot of what was shared was really like getting to know yourself, because we're so influenced by everyone else. And that in itself could be a process. Like my whole system of unique harmony is really, lifestyle is really about radical acceptance, radical self-acceptance of ourselves and of others as well. And so sometimes if we've just been caught up in like, trying to please other people or trying not to ruffle feathers or being a rebel and not considering other people, this could be a learning curve. And so we have to be patient. You have to be patient with yourself. And as far as, what I do in the projects that I have going is that I have, live workshops that I do here. For me, it's really about supporting the mother. I really feel like the mother is, and it doesn't, the mother's a heartbeat of the family, but I mean the nurturer. So I wouldn't even say mother, but the nurturer is kind of the heartbeat of the family. And if there is, people, partnership or within the family that want different things, sometimes that challenge is just in the communication. And that's part of the reason why we don't accept what we really want. So a lot of what I do is to be able to help a person name what it is they want, and then also help them to communicate that in an effective way that the person can hear them, that does not create conflict. I also do a lot of work with yoga and meditation and helping people to connect within and to get centered as well. And so you can find all this information on www.drswethacoach.com. And so I got videos on there and you can connect with me. And if you're local, come to one of my events. I'd love to have you.
Awesome. Thank you. And what a beautiful, amazing, inspirational panel. I am going to be floating on clouds after this conversation because I'm inspired by everyone here. And I can really feel the heart of who you've become as a parent and how you interact and react with your children. It's so important to healing this planet. It's so important to the changes that Lisa was talking about. It's so important in so many different ways, all of which you've touched on. And I wish we had another 2 hours. I want to thank the panelists, and I also want to thank Nina, as always, who did not produce this show, but she's always behind the scenes helping out. I want to thank Mel and Biggie over at Conscious Consumer Network, and I wanted to thank you, our viewers. So finally, wherever you are and whatever you do, continue to always do it for the love of learning.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just, sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, We must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.